Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this after action report of the 2025 OGC conference. I'm joined by five other gentlemen here who are at the conference with me. Let's just go around. We'll introduce everyone really quick, and then we'll talk about the speeches and the general vibes of the whole conference. So I got Raging Mandrill with me. How are you, sir?
Doing well, thanks.
And we got Mr. Oberon Quinn making his return.
Good to be back.
And of course, we got Charlemagne. How are you?
Doing good.
And we got Mr. Not Me, Not You.
Only took 2 days to recover after this one.
and we got rounding out the panel, Mr. Pete Quinones. How are you, Pete?
Doing good. My feet are still swollen.
I know, mine were suffering a bit on Saturday from being on my feet all day. When I finally got to bed and I took off my dress shoes, it was like a Bugs Bunny cartoon. You could see like the steam, just rising off of my feet. So yeah, you're definitely moving about quite a bit on these conferences, especially when you're running it. There's always something to be done. But gentlemen, we're talking about the Road Ahead OGC conference from this year. Why don't we just talk about overall vibes of the conference? How did this feel compared to other years? How was the venue? How were the guests, the speeches, everything? And then we can actually go into the specific talks a little bit and just give a brief summary.
Yeah, the thing that struck me most about the vibes this year was, the tone of seriousness that had descended. In previous years, the dominant emotion was almost relief to finally be amongst people with whom you could speak. But this year, we're kind of over that, and people are ready to get things done. And that was the dominant attitude I encountered in all my conversations.
Yeah, on top of the seriousness, there was also that the feeling of ease that you had somebody there who knew what you knew, who wanted to hear about the things you wanted to hear about, was still present. So the seriousness was there, but the conversations were still as free flowing as ever. And overall, each year has been better than the one before it. God willing, this will continue into perpetuity, but this was definitely an example of that.
There appeared to be a very business-like atmosphere, business-like tone. Anyone who's ever been to conferences for work, it seemed like that, except there was an eagerness. People were very eager to see certain speakers and hear what people had to say. Some of the question and answers could have gone all night. It was, I guess both of you have mentioned it so far. I guess the word would just be it was a serious thing, but we still had fun. I mean, we're not saying that everybody was just deadly dour and wanting to get down to business and everything. I think a lot of people had fun, and I think overall there was something for everyone there. I think that's why everyone enjoyed themselves.
I think there was a general sense of gratification at seeing how well the organization is being run, both by the Old Glory Club Central Committee and also the many presidents and other officers who were present. The word business is very relevant. I've been using the word conducting business a lot to describe basically what I was doing at the conference. These conferences are now less about, for me at least, being on the side actually running things. They're less about having fun and more about conducting business and seeing that I connect people with each other, introduce the people who need to be introduced, just do checks on everyone, socialize with a set of individuals who are in my head the whole time, that I'm like, I gotta go talk to this person. Okay, today I never talked to this person, so I have to go sit down with them today, that sort of thing. Just sort of constantly in work mode. Nevertheless, it was very fun and enjoyable. And I'm glad to see that there's so much opportunity to get work done at the conference that I can basically keep myself busy 100% of the time. And I think that was the same pretty much for you guys too.
Yeah, I felt like I had almost no downtime this year, but not necessarily in a bad way. I mean, obviously we have added tasks because we're actually running the thing, but at the same time, all the conversations as ever are spectacular. I don't know if you guys detected this, but I think there were like more. I detected more new faces this year and a little bit of an older crowd than last year for sure. I don't know if anyone else felt that.
Not just new faces, but incredibly impressive ones. In our work on the Central Committee, we communicate a lot with our chapter officers, our chapter presidents, but it's impossible for every one of us to meet every one of them outside of contexts like this, when most of them, actually are in one physical place. And the quality of some of the guys, I got to meet for the first time this weekend, or last weekend, was just mind blowing. The president of the Bluestone Heritage League, just all our guys. I was blown away by what kind of quality we've managed to pull into this organization.
Yes, the quality of the event too, aesthetically, greatly increased as well. Like my initial impression was that, oh, this is going to go someplace, right? This isn't like the last couple of conferences where it's just a random venue or whatever. No, everything was higher quality.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
was not.
But this definitely goes to what you're talking about, the business-like atmosphere, because we had our haberdasher making a return, who did great sales, even above what he had the year before. Bagby, of course, was there with his library of books for sale, and we had the addition of extraordinarily high-quality prints of various figures and artwork put together by people within the organization and friends of the organization. And on top of that, the printer put together, you listener have seen, I'm sure, photos of the event space with the large banners. Those were put together in-house by a friend of the organization, and it really did a lot to increase the perception of professionalism and seriousness, while at the same time providing a wonderfully welcome aesthetic boost to the otherwise somewhat plain surroundings.
Absolutely, and that printer is on Twitter at Print Practical One if you want to follow him, and you can do business with him as well. And I made sure to tell him that just as we were packing up. Actually, I was so busy I didn't even have a chance to tell him that until we were actually leaving. But they set the aesthetic bar far higher. The previous years were just black curtains and maybe we'd have our flag hanging up or something, but it was very plain. And now we have, we started with a giant Remington painting backdrop, and then we had some founding fathers, and then we had two Thomas Cole paintings flanking the whole time. And these are huge canvas prints in very good quality. So that completely changed the game. It's hard to understate just how effective those visuals were in elevating the overall experience.
It's almost as if the right wing is an aesthetic project.
Absolutely. In addition to not only was the aesthetic of the conference this year just off the charts, and it really did make a huge difference. I also liked the whole setup of the conference space this year, where we didn't have those like long school tables anymore. It was like it was round tables. The food was much better. The whole setup where we had various friends of the organization selling their wares. It was just great. The outside space where people were able to meet around the fire and have their smokes and their beverages in the evening. The whole thing was just excellent.
And the bar stayed open to a reasonable hour this year.
That is true. That is true. In previous years, it closed much earlier. Yeah.
Yeah,
I hadn't thought about that until you mentioned it, but yeah.
With the differences in the meeting spaces, there was a much larger open area for people to congregate. In previous years, the outside areas were built such that people were out of line of sight of one another, and this often led to people kind of being clustered up and not moving as freely. So this time there was much more free flow, while at the same time having many places to sit down that were relatively quiet, where you could have conversations all night on Saturday, walking back and forth across the main atrium area. I'd find some of our attendees sitting in by twos or threes, having their own small conversations while, much larger groups congregated outside. It was really everything that we needed to foster this kind of feeling of, brotherhood and being able to really get to know one another. It was wonderful.
No, brotherhood is exactly the term. I have to say, this is the first year where the fellow conference goers really felt like my brothers rather than just like-minded internet dudes.
And it seems like this was our destiny, considering all the forecast for the weekend was rain. It was supposed to rain all 3 days we were there, and I think we got a little bit of rain. Yeah.
Don't forget the earthquake.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Who wants to talk about the fact that right before we get there, there's an earthquake, and we didn't know if we were going to have water or not.
Yeah, mercifully, we were able to get water and even take advantage of some other circumstances that the earthquake opened up. But it really was a providential thing that everything came off as smoothly as it did.
Yeah, and despite the few acts of God that kept a couple of our friends and a speaker away from the conference, it still went off, without a hitch, basically. And I got nothing but praise from all of the conference goers, especially the ones that have been to ones previously. It's interesting to see who kind of has like the all the. It's almost like they're collecting like Pokemon cards at this point. It's like, oh yeah, I was at all 4 previous events, and I know how this has changed significantly.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, this is only the second one we've hosted, but if we think about the first 2 before we hosted conferences, the initial one was, especially for the first day, you had this sense of, everyone thought everyone else was probably a Fed, right? And then things start to loosen up. The second conference, people were happy to see each other again, a lot of the same faces. And that's where we announced the creation of the Old Glory Club, which was basically we proposed to the event goers that, hey, we've done this now for a second time. Let's try and make something more concrete out of it. And then, thankfully, last year's event, we hosted a very successful event as well under the domain of the Old Glory Club, and we had a lot of our early adopters there, sort of helping set us an example for placing your trust in the organization and demonstrating that it is possible to get people together. And that was a very hopeful conference. And then this one, like I said at the beginning, we've all been gratified now over the last several years with the fact that all together we've built a very, very effective organization very rapidly, with literally hundreds of people in it. And as far as I can tell, all of whom are of very high quality and are putting in significant amount of work to, embark on various, we'll say, quests in their particular states. And even the newer chapters who simply aren't doing that yet because of the youth of their organization are very anxious to get moving. And they were also gratified as well to see that, other chapters as well that were newer were facing similar issues. I thought it was really good that, to the extent that some chapters are still finding their footing and trying to figure out exactly what they're going to do with their particular organization, they found that a lot of other chapters, had similar, problems in terms of, what are we actually going to do that's going to be effective, make an effect on our lives or our social setting. But I'm confident that all the chapters are absolutely going to succeed in whatever they end up setting their minds to.
And we've already seen the fruits of that organizational effort at the conference this last weekend. I remember last year at the supposed Old Glory Club conference, fewer than a quarter of the people there were actually members of the Old Glory Club and its chapters, whereas this year the inverse is the case. I would say less than a quarter of the people there were not in a chapter of one or another.
Yeah, it was definitely the majority of people were chapter members this year.
We also had we also had friends show up who weren't speaking and were just there to hang out and support us, and people were happy to see them. So yeah, it was I don't think anyone had a bad time, and I think most people are looking forward to next year who were there.
Oh yeah, I mean these are rapidly becoming some of the highlights of my year, and I look forward to it each year significantly more. Like, oh, I'm good. I'm already hyped for next year's already. So why don't we actually get into some of the talks, gentlemen, from this year's conference? We kind of like to keep these at 3 themes every single year. I know some people complained about this in the past, but screw them because we're correct. The 3 that we kind of like to keep. We like to keep vibes-based speeches where people like to talk to the crowd. We like to keep some practical talks where people are talking about actual, yeah, practical advice for various situations. We'll get onto those in a minute. And then we also have hardcore political theory as well for our talks. And I've thought that this year we had a nice blend of all 3 of them. They were all paced very well. And there wasn't like a single one that I thought was, it's difficult to pick out the really, really good best one.
Well, speaking of vibes, I think we should probably mention there was a talk before we began actual talks, which is we had a video at the very start of the conference before we introduced Dave as the first speaker. And that video was just mind-blowingly excellent on every conceivable level.
Oh,
yeah, it also helped that the room had excellent audio quality as well, and it really delivered this booming pro-American patriotic experience for the viewers of this like 3-minute long trailer, not for the conference but for our people. And I thought that was excellently put together and very moving.
Yeah, the video was, a series of classic American scenes of wilderness and the Revolutionary War and the Civil War, all set over a very inspiring voiceover. Do we know, did Paul Suda write that the script for that voiceover?
I have no reason to believe otherwise. He also narrated it.
Yeah.
I believe he put the whole thing together. So if you have not seen it, dear listener, please do find Paul Suda on Twitter, and he has posted it there.
Yeah, so that was a perfect stage setting for getting everyone just in the right frame of mind for what was to come over the next few days. And if we want to start getting into the actual speeches now, of course, we had Dave Green, the distributist, first as our headline speaker for the first day. He was the only speaker on Friday.
Yeah, I thought Dave did an excellent job in the opening role this year. This was his first year. He actually opened the conference. Previous years, he's usually like just before dinner on the second night is usually when Dave gets slotted in around that time. So I thought he did a great job opening the conference. His is definitely more vibes based, which most of his really are, but he did an excellent job of taking on pretty much every other group that's currently in the political scene, whether it's your leftists, your elite human capital types, your sensible centrists, your normie conservatives, whatever, and basically listed off how none of them have any answers for the huge problems that are currently facing our country, and how it is up to us to solve these things. We're the people who are about action, not just about complaining about things.
Yeah, Dave's talk definitely set the tone in exactly the way we wanted. And Dave, having a rather masochistic streak in him, frequently interacts with the other spheres that exist politically, be it people on the left or others in the quote elite human capital right. So I don't think there's anyone better than him to make the statement that the only people getting anything done in the sphere seem to be those who have attended the conference. And he did make this line that really stuck out to me. He said that hatred of evil is the beginning of vitality, and that is as you might say, pregnant statement. In that, first one must look at evil, and then one must be stirred to action by their visceral hatred of it. And from this, vitality arises. And I don't think that there was a single man in that room that couldn't deeply relate to that statement.
Yeah, I agree. Would you classify his speech more in vibes, practical advice, or theory?
I'd call it
Definitely.
vibes.
Vibes.
Yeah.
I agree. It was a vibe speech, which I think is a good way to open.
Yeah, it set the tone for the whole conference, and he tackled the theme that we set for the entire conference, that being the road of head, right from the get go, and you'll see that will continue with the rest of our speakers.
Yes, indeed. I will say this. I continue to be impressed each year by Dave's speeches. He's definitely one of the ones I look forward to every year. And it's very interesting how all of the speakers, they're not necessarily in communication with each other about what they're going to talk about, but it's always amazing to see how everyone has their fingers on the pulse and they're all generally talking about the same ideas and the same themes. It's really good confirmation that all of us just, don't have our heads up our own ass, basically. When there's many sources converging on a single point, it tells you there's some truth there. All right. Let's move on to the opening on Saturday, which, of course, is our very own Mr. Prudentialist, who has taken the opening Saturday speech every single year at one of these conferences. He really likes that role. And it really just is, once again, amazing to watch the masterclass that is Mr. Prudentialist's speaking ability, just to have no notes whatsoever and just go up and have like a 1 hour speech, more or less, off the cuff. It's truly a sight to behold. Everyone should be taking notes.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a force of nature or if it's a machine, but he for those who've never been to a Prudentialist speech, he speaks entirely extemporaneously, and he does it without a single or ah, and he just goes on with point after point after point in a very engaging manner that is a joy to behold.
Yes, the man certainly has a gift, and I thank God that he was given to us and not to the enemy. What a powerful weapon he could be if he were wielded by the wrong hands.
Yeah, he clearly has a very sharply honed technique that he's put a lot of work into. He always has the best talk on a technical level in terms of the act of speaking itself.
Well, it's not only the way he speaks, it's also that how much information he actually carries with him. It's what he knows about the level on which he's speaking about the topic he's chosen to talk about is, you can just tell that there may not be anyone else up on the stage who knows as much about what he's chosen to talk about than he is, with no notes and being funny and having pop culture references. I mean, it's a remarkable thing to watch. As somebody who's just a stuttering prick myself, I am just floored every time I see him speak.
Oh yeah, and it's a great way to get everyone on their toes after the breakfast of the first evening. Um, you know, well, what more is there to say? I mean, all of us, definitely myself, need to take a few lessons of public speaking from Mr. Prudentialist. You know, would you guys classify his as more? It was kind of like a mix of vibes and of practical advice too, because obviously Prude has been mentioning, in combination with his last year talk, more about local activism and local politics. But also, I mean, his was pretty vibes based as well, even though he made a point to not be so uplifting as Dave was the night before. He kind of took on the misanthropic side that Dave is usually famous for in his speech. But I don't know. I dig it.
Yeah, generally Prudentialist always gives much more practical advice. Like he usually is not a really charismatic or vibe speaker. He kind of relies on his technique to get his point and his message across. But yes, this year was much more of a certainly a sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here.
Yeah, I don't know what you guys are talking about. Prude would never play the straight man.
Yeah. If ever we do something in the future, I would love for Prude to like teach a class on public speaking. He'd be fantastic for that.
Yeah,
All right.
and as you say, like him opening Saturday is like, so if Dave sets the tone for the conference, then Prude sets the tone for the day, which is high energy. Even if it's a little bit more of an even-eyed, level-headed examination of where we're at, and less optimistic, as you say, than one might expect from the kind of energy that he brings to the room. So it's a great kicking off point to kind of get everyone ready for the day's activities, because there are always quite a lot.
Mm-hmm. All
Yeah,
right.
despite being first thing in the morning, his talk is always the one I pay the most attention to because he's the most skilled at keeping the audience captive and throws in a good amount of humor as well.
Also helps that breakfast was freaking excellent that morning.
Oh,
it was
yeah,
just-
Yeah,
breakfast
it
was
was.
so good.
Oh, yeah, it was
Oh
really
my
good.
God.
It was really good that morning. All right. Now, after Prude finished up his excellent speech, we moved on to our good friend, Mr. Jeff Deist, who gave a speech which was more on the theory side, but also vibes based. He basically did a full intellectual takedown of this term that everyone likes to throw around, particularly on the normie right, of classical liberalism. You know, like what does this even mean now? And it was pretty nice to watch him just eviscerate these people because they totally deserve it.
Yeah, he presented a mea culpa moment for himself as well, basically, renouncing libertarianism and what he spent a good portion of his life being into intellectually. So that was really interesting to see, and I think it's really important for him to demonstrate, basically saying, yes, I had all of these ideas, I participated in these intellectual milieus, and we were completely wrong. Actually, what I know now is it refutes what I've thought for most of my life, and this is the correct way, and it's fine to, and it's the correct thing to do to not try and engage in some sort of psychological cope mechanism with yourself and just admit that yes, this is classical liberalism, or these classical liberals, it's just wrong and irrelevant.
It turns out that even the Ron Paul revolution eats its own.
Well, I think one of the interesting things is, Jeff and I are the same age, and you have people who all the time I hear this. It's like it's one criticism I guess people think they can get me with is how could you get as old as you are and still hold on to those beliefs? It's like people go through their whole damn lives being normies.
Yeah, it definitely
then-
takes a certain type of character to be able to continually update your understanding of the world as new information comes in. Because as you say, Pete, most people don't even absorb any new information. They get done with high school or college and they're set. So I really enjoyed Mr. Deist, going through all of these thinkers. He mentioned Rothbard, he mentioned Mises, and he took a scalpel to this kind of liberalism that gives rise to libertarianism, and it really brought it down. It was very refreshing because we have a lot of people who came from the libertarian sphere. The libertarian to right wing pipeline stays winning. But it's rare that somebody really takes the time to go through each of the beliefs and thinkers that they once admired and really demonstrate how they were wrong.
And let's mention that he's gone from being the president of the Mises Institute to being a member of the Magnolia League here in Alabama.
Amazing.
Yeah, we are most definitely happy to have him.
Yeah, I'm really pleased that we attract such high quality men who, are of such repute.
Alrighty. His speech might have been my favorite. Jeff's speech was definitely my favorite last year because he did an excellent job of just putting a case forward of, you defend your friends. So I remember one of the highlights of the conference last year actually named you, Pete, when Jeff was criticized by various other people for saying, "Oh well, how dare you associate with Pete Quinones?" And Jeff's response was, "Pete's a friend." No. So that was a highlight of mine last year, and I also greatly enjoyed his speech this year. So we're happy to have him.
I think Jeff Dice's speech was my second favorite, to be honest.
Well, you
Yes.
gave a speech, so that's natural.
No, my favorite was not my own. Thank you.
Yes, I would probably, it would be in the top 3. I will decide later whether it's first, second, or third.
Alrighty. Let's move on then. So, due to a mix-up with the schedule, the competency crisis, and the weather and air traffic control towers, there was a switch around in the schedule, which is kind of nice. That we run the whole thing and everyone's really, really flexible. It's pretty awesome that we could do that. And of course, nobody in the audience really had any issues with it either. So next, after Jeff Dice, we had our own Mr. Jay Ford, who gave the first, I would call it the very first hardcore, like practical talk of the conference. And he basically gave an after action report of what he and his boys did down in North Carolina during the aftermath of Hurricanes Milton and Helene. And he gave us some very good practical advice on what it actually is like being in a disaster zone, working with various organizations, whether it be FEMA or other, charity or nonprofits. So very good practical advice for that one.
Yeah, I thought his was chock full of useful information, like stuff that if you weren't like keyed into disaster relief, you would not really be interested or ever encounter.
Yeah, and I was down there with him in the beginning of his tenure. He stayed far longer than I did, but during his talk, when he was elaborating on the things that he saw and the interactions he had with various townships and official organizations, it surprised even me how bad it was. So no matter how bad in your imagination it is working with these government agencies, even in a disaster, it is even worse than that. But the number one thing that I really took away from that was the importance of having 501c3s at the ready when something like this occurs. Any sort of good works that you want to do in your community, whether it be in the name of an OGC chapter or in the name of any kind of disaster relief or any kind of charitable organization or organizing, 501c3 is absolutely necessary to smooth that process and allow it to get done.
Yes, I think his speech is the first one we've mentioned so far that is going to result in very specific practical steps being taken. I was really pleased to see him regale so many members of the club with what exactly happened down there in the Carolinas, helping with the response to Hurricane Helene. I think you could easily make a case for, I could easily put it in the top 3 speeches. I won't personally, just because I've been privy to a lot of the information that he talked about in the speech. So for me, I won't rank it as a personal favorite, just because, a lot of it wasn't new to me. But I would not be surprised if a lot of the people who were not familiar with the what he talked about would rank it very high. Like if you're really into that sort of practical on the ground stuff. The knowledge he dropped there is basically second to none. He definitely had the best practical speech, hands down.
And indeed, the events he covered will have further implications for the conference, but we'll get to that when we get to that.
Yes, of course. And I think the final thing that I will mention on this that I really enjoyed about the speech was that not only were the successes mentioned, but also some of the failures and some of the mistakes made, and how people can adjust from those into the future. Whether it's working with certain ego invested individuals, or just lack of experience on what you actually need to do in situations like this. Everything is a data point, and everything will be used in the future when, no doubt, another situation like this calls for young American men to step up to the plate to rescue their fellow countrymen, because we know the government and those manning these organizations will not step up to the task. And as we know, still, these people are still completely and largely abandoned in North Carolina almost a year later. Why don't we move on to the next talk, which was interesting because it was actually a very, very quick one. It was only like 20 minutes. Most of the talks range around, that 45 minutes to an hour. But this one we kind of just squeezed in there right before we all went to lunch. This is by Mr. Carl Dahl. And this one was probably the first one that was firmly in the theory camp. We talked about the Spanish Civil War and examples of how the various factions, while they were still able to maintain their own, identities, their own iconography, they all united together to fight against the evil commie menace.
The power of friendship.
Oh yeah, his speech definitely had
talk about the Spanish Civil War.
Yeah, his talk definitely had the funniest joke of the entire event.
Yeah. Yeah. I liked doing this smaller, shorter talk. Maybe we could try doing more than one of those next year. That was a nice break from, more like 40-minute talks. That said, having one less talk this year was good as well. I liked having more break time. But anyway, back to Carl Dahl. I could say his speech was also one foot in the practical territory as well, because, there's some theory about cooperation, but he's talking about events that actually happened as well. So I wouldn't put it entirely in the pure theory camp.
And indeed, it's already kind of broken containment, as some of the ideas he brought up in that speech have surfaced today in the wider sphere.
Yes, like the condensed nature of his speech meant that each of the points kind of were driven home a little bit faster. And the main takeaway that I got out of it was that all these different factions in Spain, as has already been mentioned, came together to unite against what can only be described as the forces of evil, and they were able to put aside their petty political or ideological is probably the better word, differences in order to unite against what is a political, that is to say, existential threat. And in the meantime, while the right was doing this, the left was beset by infighting due to a desire for ideological purity within its ranks. And we all know how that war ended up. So let it be an object lesson. And I think that Carl Dahl did a good job conveying that.
I think that one of the things I was most impressed by was he finished his speech and then he started taking questions. And it also happened to be time to go get food. And I went out there and I got food and I stood there and talked for a couple of minutes, and then it came back in and people were still asking him questions.
Yeah, his definitely had the most lively Q&A for sure.
Yeah, that went for a while. So obviously people were very intrigued by what he had to say and the very short history lesson that he gave.
Yeah, I had the exact same experience when I went to go, grab lunch to sort of beat the line, and then I came back and the Q&A was still going on. So that's great to see. I always love to see when we get a high amount of engagement during the Q&A period.
Yep, absolutely. Now, of course, after lunch this year, we did something new and different where we had a very, very long break afterwards, which we had not done in previous years. This was met with universal praise from everyone that I talked to about it. There were some people that changed some clothes and they went out for hikes around the local park area, which was really cool. That's always something that we're encouraging. There are some people who just went and took a nap, because people like to be up late at these kinds of things. So I think the extra social time is definitely something we will keep for next year. But when we returned, we had Mr. Oren McIntyre.
Before we get on to that real quick, I during that extended break, there's this funny little anecdote. I was in my room and my fiance was like, "Oh, there are some teenagers wrestling in the grass out there." And I looked out the balcony and I realized it was two OGC members practicing jujitsu in the grass.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't even know. Really? I didn't know they did
What?
that.
Oh no, poor Chris.
Yeah,
Chris
they
missed
were.
the conference that we actually did jujitsu.
Yeah,
Oh,
it was
no.
it was very funny. I yelled out to them, "Hey, we've got like 5 minutes for the next speakers on."
Huh. That's amazing. I didn't know that. Huh. All righty. Well, shall we talk about the next talk when we came back from the break? It was none other than Oren McIntyre, good friend of the organization and good friend of ours, of course. It's always nice when I always love when Oren opens all of his speeches by just giving praise for all of us because we've been friends for a really long time. So it's like he's doing like a homecoming tour after going to various Con Inc. Organizations and other speeches throughout the year. So it is cool for him to come back. And I wanted to make this point. Something I noted from the conference this year is based off of previous years, we're almost building a canon of talks and people are referencing the speeches from previous years. And it's almost like there's a dialogue going on over the years. And Oren actually gave a talk that was a direct response to yours from last year, Charlie. So maybe you should take point on this one. How'd you feel about that, first of all?
Yes, I was pleased to see that. I did a, I guess, theoretical talk last year, re-examining the assumptions we've made about, I guess we could say, elite theory and forms of government and the value of republicanism and the having our written constitution as part of our political tradition. So, in response to my, I would say, somewhat inconclusive speech about our American political traditions and putting forward the idea that we should examine them more closely and not throw them out entirely, Oren basically took on that mission of examining the concept of a republic more in depth, and he referenced the ancient form of the republic, dating back to Athens, and tried to bring that model forward into America today, and basically discussed, what are the conditions under which that can work. Will we see those conditions reemerge? What conditions might we see emerge instead? He sort of proposed a collapsing scenario in which if Republican government is to reemerge, it will be in the form of the American states and not at the federal level, I think is the conclusion he was really driving at. Did that about sum it up?
Well, it's interesting because, like your speech, I wouldn't characterize his speech as conclusive. I think he definitely left a question mark hanging in the air. Yes, he laid out the one scenario where we collapse back into smaller republics, but he also, envisioned a scenario where the geopolitical body that is the United States remains a unitary whole, and invited us to consider the implications that would have for, reforming our government, given that a return to the old Republican forms may not be possible under those circumstances.
Well, I think,
Yeah,
he's basically, what he was doing in that speech was he was addressing Sam Francis from Leviathan and His Enemies, the revolution of mass and scale. that basically you cannot have 300, you cannot have a polity and one government or one entity over 300 million people. And it has to get smaller. And that's one of those things that is a constant argument between people on the right, even people within our sphere, because there's a lot of people who want to save this government or believe that the country can exist as a polity of 300, a polis of 300 people. Well, I mean, that's a contradiction in terms. A polis is a people. We're not people. So,
it's really
good. No, good.
Really interesting thought just occurred to me is next year it would be really good to have Lou Templar to give a speech responding to Auron and Charlie, because for those who don't know, Lou Templar in one of his alt Twitter accounts laid out this beautiful aesthetic vision of essentially a holy American empire where the country doesn't disintegrate as a single geopolitical unit, but it does confederate down into its constituent regional characters. And I would be interested to hear his response and how that our vision might fit into the questions that Auron and Charlie have articulated over the last 2 years.
Funny that you mentioned that, because he came to mind in what I was thinking. Alternative to the scenario where the federal government collapses down into state republics. The only real alternative that one can imagine, given what Auron laid out in terms of addressing Sam Francis, the only other option is we do away with pretending that we have a republic now, because we don't, and become an actual imperial system, which when I thought of that, I immediately thought of his propaganda. I think Templar did a great job a few years ago, at this point, I believe, sort of establishing that aesthetic vision for an American empire.
Yeah, you hear that, El Templar? I know you're listening. You've been called out. You were called out at the event. You were called out now in public. We want to hear you speak, so get writing.
Well, I'm definitely going to respond to Auron next year, because I want to continue this series, and I had already thought of an alternative to what he was putting forward. I'm not going to respond directly to. I think I would like to see El Templar respond in terms of presenting the case for a holy American empire. What I would like to do is change the subject to some extent, and rather than focus so much on our political traditions and think of our traditions as what came after 1789, I would like to embrace the tradition of great American men and what these men accomplished through determination and will in order to create and pioneer a nation out of nothing and against enemies that wish to see it destroyed. Auron mentioned that, well, we don't have a British to fight now, so that doesn't work. But I think that's taking my idea a little too literally. So I'll probably be looking this year for a selection of Americans that possibly in different centuries that sort of demonstrate what I'm trying to talk about. Perhaps maybe a very Carlylean speech. Maybe that's something I could put together. I think perhaps that is the direction we want to look when trying to respect our American traditions, is maybe trying to focus on my constitution and my republic is actually completely the wrong direction. So we'll see what people think of that. And I think if El Templar does a speech on American Imperium in response as well, that could be a really interesting set of talks. But we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
I just think it's awesome that not only do we have like speeches referencing other speeches, but we have speeches that are in actuality in dialogue with the previous speeches of different years. I think that's so cool.
Yeah, definitely one of my favorite developments for this year, and no doubt will definitely continue into the future. And I'll have more to say on this as we continue on with the talks. But after After Arn gave his talk, we had the OGC Central Committee panel, which similar to like we did last year, was more or less a meet and greet mixed with a Q&A. So this is definitely the most unique talk at the whole conference because it's the only one where there's multiple people, number one. But it was fun to get some audience engagement, and we actually spoke for pretty much the whole allotted time on the schedule. There was a lot of interest, a lot of really good questions from our audience. But before we even got into that, there was an amazing moment that we had to share with everyone. The OGC presented 3 medals for American excellence, presented by none other than Mr. Mike of Pole, to 3 gentlemen in the organization for their stellar performance down in North Carolina, assisting their fellow countrymen. And those, of course, were for Mr. Not Me, Not You, Mr. J. Ford, and Mr. Mellon.
Yeah, the ceremony was perfectly short, and it was very very touching. Not just because I was a recipient, but Mike of Pole put a lot of work into making these. So our very own Charlemagne provided the blanks, which were silver rounds from his own coffers, and Mike made the design and engraved them himself, and they're very handsome. And he also made the boxes that they were presented in. So, Mike of Pole holding up a very professional artistic standard, as well as being so generous enough to give us his skills and time.
Don't sleep on those beechwood boxes. Those were absolutely beautiful.
They're poplar, my friend.
Poplar.
Yeah, you can take a look at the OGC Twitter account, guys in the audience, for a look at these medals in the box that they came in. They look fantastic.
And if
Yeah,
you
and
would
he gave
like
us that.
one, then you too should engage in some American excellence in the coming year.
Yes, but of course we're gonna give these out very, very sparingly. I mean, the 3 recipients this year absolutely deserve them, and I think we want to keep a very high standard for this particular award. But I'm sure we will hand out similar awards in the future. Mike of Pole told us a really interesting story about the poplar wooden boxes he made for these as well, and he chose poplar because it tends to grow in flooded disaster areas. So there was a lot of symbolic relevance to even the box. So yeah, that ceremony couldn't have gone better, and I'm glad we were able to do something to recognize these 3 guys for what they did down there.
Absolutely. Do we have any comments on the actual panel itself? It was definitely lively. There's some fun times, some good jokes in there, a lot of good information. Was handed out to everyone in the audience, most of which are our chapter members. So it's a fun time, those panels, when we get all of us up on stage together.
Yeah, I think it served the exact purpose that we set out to have it serve. The chapter members in the audience, they have questions. They're not necessarily used to interacting with people on Central. We're so large at this point that we've passed the point where the Central Committee is going to be able to know all or even most of the individual members. So getting this time to ask questions and get to know the Central Committee members a little bit better is definitely something that's going to be making an appearance in every single one of our conferences going forward.
Yeah, we are already at multiples of Dunbar's number, so having the transparency of having the members of the Central Committee up there on the stage where you can see them and put a face to the name, it's invaluable for maintaining the cohesion of the larger organization.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think the thing that shocked me the most was just how long it went. People just kept asking one question after another, one question. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm saying it was just, wow. I mean, no other guest, no guest got that, no guest speaker got that, nobody from the OGC who spoke got that. So yeah, people are eager to find out what we're doing, and if you show up to the conference, you might find out.
Yeah, well,
And
that's an important point because it highlights that the conference isn't really about the speeches anymore. That's the those speeches are obviously important, but equally important is that this conference is about an organization, a society, a brotherhood, and the fact that that panel, which was about that organization, had more uh, Q&A interest than any given speaker points that well, this is running very successfully. I was very happy to see that.
and
Absolutely.
and a lot of the questions were very practical in nature, what to expect going forward, but also what can we do. A lot of the chapter heads that were there and the chapter members asked questions about, what are some of the things that we can be doing in our local community? What are the sort of things that we can be doing for the greater good of the brotherhood at large? And it was very good to see that kind of engagement, and that all of our members are thoughtful, and they really believe in this thing.
Absolutely. And the only thing that we could possibly do to make this panel go any smoother is if we can actually, for once, get the group photo together. We-
Never get us all.
nope, never. Alrighty.
To be
So,
fair, despite at least one person missing it, Mr. Turnipseed had to miss the conference, unfortunately. So even if we had succeeded in rallying everybody, it still wouldn't have been all of us.
that is true. That is true. And of course, Ryan was greatly missed this year. Which another just hand of providence that Mr. Fahrenheit volunteered to be MC this year when Ryan had taken it the last 2 years. So that would have been interesting if our MC had to cancel at the last moment and we had to rush things together. But yeah, Paul did an excellent job. All right. Well, that was the conclusion of the Saturday night, the panel. And we opened it up into social time when, of course, people were up until wee hours of the morning. I guess it's kind of become the meta now that Friday night, after everyone has been traveling, is kind of the go easy night. People kind of go to bed a little bit early. But Saturday is the night where everyone goes hard, so to speak. So I heard word that there were some people that stayed up until 5:30 in the morning on, well, it would have been Sunday. At that point. So yeah, I myself didn't make it past I think like 2:30 or 3 is when I called it. But yeah, there's always some stragglers that are up until the morning.
Yeah, I tapped out about 2 a.m.
I tried to go to bed around 12:30, but immediately upon walking inside, I was drawn into a conversation, which then led back outside. Which
Many such cases.
frequently.
That happened to me at least twice at the after party, to a great humor of many people. So,
Yeah, I'm not going to mention the name of anyone who showed up, but when you walked outside on Saturday night, there were heavyweights talking, people who everyone knows their name, and you walked into a conversation where you're like, whoa, wait a minute, and it was so funny that there was one person who everybody's like, wait a minute, he's here. And it's like, yeah, come on over. You can meet him and everything. And there was like, we weren't even, some people weren't even aware that there were some big names who had actually decided that they were going to show up. And yeah, I mean, it was some of the conversations I had outside of the talks, and just having a cigar out on the patio. Just absolutely amazing. Amazing information.
Mentioning that how some of us aren't even aware of certain characters being in the audience, it just speaks to the level of conversation that you have with literally everyone. It would be impossible for you to have a conversation with everyone at the event. You just can't do it. Everyone you engage with has something to say, has something to offer, and you could easily look down at your watch and see that you've been talking to the same person for 2.5 hours, and it felt like no time has passed. But there's always a list that I have in my brain of people I want to talk to every year, and I just never get to complete it every year. So I always feel bad because I'm like, oh, I didn't get to talk to this guy again. But and that list is ever growing as more and more people are coming to these events every year in consecutive years. So, it's like meeting up with old friends again. So it's going to become ever harder to try and complete my list.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there were
it's
definitely
certainly
people.
it's
Yeah, there were
certainly one of the self-disciplinary challenges of the year to muster the discipline to actually go to bed at a reasonable time. It's almost impossible to will yourself to simply leave and go to sleep when there are so many interesting things happening out there. I think having a shuttle to catch back to the cabins for me helped out with that because I didn't have a choice.
Yeah, I definitely didn't get to talk to at least some people at the event. I did my best to introduce myself to as many people as I could, but I'm sure there was at least one or two people who I never got to speak with.
Yeah, there's also a balance between catching up with old friends now who have been to most of the conferences and some of which are now even in leadership positions. Like I realized this weekend that the president of the Delaware Crossing Society, he was more or less just in the room after the first conference we all met at. He was like in the room we had gotten just for us to stay in for an after party. He was like there when we all really started becoming friends and basically set us on the path of forming the Old Glory Club. So it's really cool to see people involved at that level who have been around since the beginning, and you always want to talk to them most, really, but there are so many new people to meet, and so many networking opportunities you want to present to your friends as well.
Yeah, and the other thing too that I really enjoy about all the moments of having conversations is like, obviously us, we're, I want to pat us on the back, but we're the organizers. We're from Central Committee. People want to come up and talk to us and introduce themselves to us, and I'm just continuing to be amazed how there's just zero spurgery at all at these things. Like, I imagine, Pete, I'm sure you can attest to this, going to libertarian conferences throughout the years. I'm sure you just dread, like, when somebody comes up and tries to stop you. I just don't have that feeling at all at these things. I like someone comes up and stops me, introduces themselves. I know it's going to be a good conversation, and I'm not going to be immediately looking for an exit.
Well, it helped that there was someone who was at last year's conference who didn't show up to this conference. I think we all.
Yes, no, that was very true. There was zero spurging at this conference, which was perfect. And yeah, there was no point at which I was upset that someone had introduced themselves to me. The only time I sought it out is just because I had so many other conversations I was trying to get to. Because like Pete said, we had a lot of really interesting people show up just as guests, and you wanted to not only talk to them but get them to meet some of your other friends as well. And yeah, there was just so much work to be done with happy work, but I felt like I was just working constantly trying to just check in on all the socializing, and this person's interested in this, and someone who can help them, so you have to go introduce them and all this. And
Yeah, this conference was definitely more, I don't know if I want to say draining, but in a good way. There was a lot of effort that went into this conference that took a toll on the mental and physical well-being.
Yeah. I was completely and utterly obliterated. Like, honestly, I can't imagine. I can't remember being as tired as I was on Sunday night when we got to the after party. I have not been that tired in a really long time. And like, I'm out here like hauling entire freaking trees in the woods, and like, I have not been as tired as I was since then. I mean, it didn't help too that the heavy drinking and all the nicotine on top of it, but that's just kind of part of the experience.
Yeah, there were some thick clouds of cigar smoke wafting about the outdoor spaces.
I still smell like smoke.
Yeah, it definitely took me about 2 days to recover. And speaking of all the happy substances, the alcohol, the nicotine, there's also caffeine. I overheard one of the staff workers as she was bringing back an empty, dispenser of coffee, she says, "These guys really slurp this stuff." So
Yeah, I think that might have just been me, but I was very happy when we got to the after party, and there were actually places to sit.
Oh man.
Oh
Just
yeah.
too happy.
That after party was, I mean, I thought it was going to be a tall order trying to beat the one that we had last year, but this one really just knocked it out of the park. I mean, we had maybe like 50 or 60 people there, and I didn't feel crammed at all the entire time. It was perfect for us.
It was
it went
phenomenal.
very-
That space could not possibly have been better.
And a lot of the more interesting guests decided to show up, so that just made it that much better.
Yeah, I was really happy to see that those people came to the after party and we were able to continue to have awesome conversations. And I think you mentioned that there was one practically an entire speech given just at the after party for
Yeah.
those who were there to listen for it.
Yeah, there was basically one of our guests gave a class, and we just sat there jaw agape listening. Yeah, it was just wonderful.
All right. Why don't we get back to what we're actually talking about on Sunday morning? So after a breakfast that unfortunately I got there 2 minutes before the opening talk started in the morning. So I got the scraps from the breakfast that morning before I had to sit down and listen to the next talk. I've never missed a speech at one of these things, and I don't plan on that to change. But we opened Sunday with my pick for the best speech of the whole conference was Mr. George Bagby. I had the pleasure of
100% agree.
yeah.
100% agree.
I had the pleasure of getting dinner a couple times earlier this year with Bagby when he was swinging by my hometown. So I've got to know him more and more as the years have gone by. And the man is just a masterclass at giving these speeches. And he gave, if anyone is familiar with Mr. Bagby's Telegram, he will often regale us with what it is like dealing with boomers on his cruise ship that he's dealing with, and bringing in a little bit of that I guess you call them tales from the trenches into his speech, talking about how there's just a whole class of people in our society who have been infected with this mind virus, where they literally wish that their ancestors had been destroyed by various like Indian tribes, and then tying that into our own history as Americans. He also gave a great shout out to the OGC, who actually gave Mr. Bagby a book grant earlier this year for republishing a series of historical texts on America. And one of those was the reign of Andrew Jackson. So he talked about Andrew Jackson's presidency quite a bit in his speech as well. But the prose that Bagby has in his speeches is just unmatched. Can't recommend it. People listening to him enough.
Any discussion of the best speech of a conference pretty much has to take it as read that Bagby is going to have given the best speech.
yeah, you can really tell his time as an educator was a time well spent. I would gladly have him teaching any child of mine on any subject. But my favorite part of his talk is when he turned the onus onto all of us in the audience and reminded us that it is our duty to not only preserve the true history of the United States and her many, many heroes, but also to present them in a positive light, because these men were, without a doubt, worthy of admiration and praise. And the modern age is nothing if not scornful of the wonderful and heroic things that they did. So him letting us know that it's on us is a very good lesson to take away from it.
Yeah, I agree. Bagby's speech is easily my favorite. I could make a case for others, but just going with my gut, it is the one I most fondly remember, and it was like that last year as well. He nails all of the critical components. It's almost like combining the prudentialist's technical skill with the ultimate vibe speech, while also offering us very serious and important advice that we can apply. He just has everything going in his speeches, and they're always very moving. I mean, his speech is the most emotionally moving this year, and I think last year too, which is unusual because I don't think any of the other speakers tend to do that to me. But the way he's able to present American history is very moving.
One of the things that you get from Bagby is when you hear him talk, you forget about politics. You realize that it's all about us, and politics will flow from that by necessity. But Bagby is talking about when he speaks, when he opens his mouth, he's talking about the things that really matter, the things that really make a people, make a polis. And it's very rare. There are very few people who can do that and deliver it with a sense of urgency, a sense of seriousness, but also he's not an angry man. He's just he's earnest, and it's very rare.
And he has cause to be angry, yet he is not.
Absolutely, and I echo everyone else's statements on this, and I would also say that the point of Bagby's speeches being the most emotional is 100% on the mark. I mean, the man will almost drive you to tears.
And I will say this, just to shout out somebody who was there who won't mind us mentioning, Mr. Thomas 777 was there. Bagby has been on, I think, over half of the episodes of Thomas's new season of Mind Phaser. And if you are not subscribed and you're not listening to these two talk, you are missing out. I've listened to each of those episodes at least twice. And just imagine Thomas and Bagby talking about what civilization would really look like if men were allowed to be men. It's incredible. Every time Bagby opens his mouth, I'm listening.
Well, thank you for letting me know, because I am a Mind Phaser subscriber, but I haven't kept up with it lately. So that is very good news, because that's basically two of my favorite guys talking with each other. I mean, this is going to be great stuff. I can't wait to listen to that.
Alrighty. Well, let us move on. After we had lunch on Sunday, we went over and we had Mr. Capitalissimo come in and give a talk. This was also a more practical talk. He was giving us tips and advice on how to thrive in cities and take back little bits and parts of them that we can. So definitely this one had a little bit of a lively Q&A too, specifically between him and Aaron McIntyre going back and forth. So what do we have to say about Cap's speech?
His speech was one that I very much would appreciate him putting into an article or a video that we could host. Tactically, it was very sound. It gave a lot of good avenues by which we can, have our own enclaves within the cities and maybe even take them over, which I know, dear listener, sounds like an impossibility. But when you listen to Cap break it down, it seems a lot more doable. And it's not just that we want the cities because they have a cultural history or because there are so many people in them, though that is important too. But the cities lend a kind of cultural currency to any given movement or group. So and while Cap didn't necessarily make the most of this point, our brothers in the hinterlands can have their cultural status increased by those in the cities, pushing in the same direction. So it was definitely something that I would love to see broken down more.
Yes, not only is taking back the cities not impossible, it is indispensable. With all respect, Pete, to your advice to get out of the cities, we must contest them. We cannot leave that ground unchallenged. If you do, I invite you to study the Russian Civil War for what that looks like when the city goes to war with the country. It doesn't work out well for the country. And in that sense, Capitalissimo's speech was the most important to me in terms of content, because I'm in Chicago, I'm in a big city, and it was a revelation to me, the legal mechanisms, the very clever legal workarounds that he suggested to actually go about, if not taking the cities back, at least contesting them.
It is funny you mentioned that.
I did agree with a lot of what he had to say. Russian Civil War is a little different. All the armories were in the cities. All the guns are not in the cities right now.
That's correct. And the American situation would definitely be different because we have this rich store of arms in the hands of the peasantry, as it were. But scale still matters.
Yeah, I think his speech was possibly the most important in terms of immediate information like that, because, you know, I've left the cities because that's where I personally want to be. I haven't left for political reasons, nor do I think that it is a good idea to do for political reasons. And if our people all flee the cities, we're just going to lose. We have to control the cities. They are our ancestral heritage as well. It's ridiculous, the idea that we have to abandon them. We don't have to, and there are ways we don't have to. We can take them. And I mean, I would like to see Capitalismo basically lead a committee within the club that turns his research into action. And if not him, someone else who feels motivated and wants to work with him in the club needs to actually come to us and found that committee, because frankly it just needs to be done, and it needs to be done now. This is something that I can't take up after the conference, but we need someone to take up. So I'm really hoping someone will come to us, maybe Cap himself, and actually lead this effort.
Yeah, that would be excellent because, as I said, this is one of the more important action items to emerge from the conference.
I do. On your point from earlier, Mr. Quinn, I did. I thought this during Cap's speech that it was almost like a tailor-made speech just for you. So it's no surprise.
I thought the same thing.
Yeah. So it's no surprise you're giving it such praise. So, alrighty. So moving on after Cap's speech, we have our very own Mr. Raging Mandrill, who gave his speech. It was also a theory-based talk. Actually, Mandrill, since you're here, why don't you give the audience your basic pitch for your conference talk this year?
Right. So this essentially was a talk about the origination point of Boomer Truth. There is a book that you can find, and you should all look up. Right. It is called The War Against the West, and it is by a individual by the name of Aurel Kolnai. It is on Internet Archive. I highly suggest you all go read it. The essential point of the speech was to go through some of the quotations he has, discuss them, and to give step by step how exactly Boomer Truth was formulated and where exactly, and to basically prove that this book is where what we know as Boomer Truth came from this gentleman's mind.
It was definitely a very spicy speech. I really enjoyed that. But more than that, I had one of my friends at the organization, or one of my friends at the group, also one of our brothers, was saying, he kept being like, "Wait a minute, when was this written? Wait a minute, when was this written? There's no way that what was being said in this book was written before the modern age." But as you pointed out in your talk, Mandrill, he basically wrote the book on Boomer Truth.
Yes, it is published originally in 1938. So take that for what it's worth.
Yeah, I have to.
I think your speech was actually the most successful in terms of meeting a fairly high ambition, because I knew the contents of your thesis before going into it, and we had talked about it last time we had met personally, and I was really hoping to see it all come together, and I think you made the case perfectly for your thesis that this singular book, which has the contents. Not, I mean, saying just boomer truth is an understatement. The book describes the entire post-war international order before the war even begins. But not only that, you did what I said you needed to do, which is actually connect it to the politicians and the other people involved in policy making, and you achieved that tremendously well. So I would say that in terms of the ambition you set for yourself at a theory level, this was probably the best theory speech we've had.
Yeah, you made it very clear that Cole and I didn't just guess right about what the future would hold. You laid out the causal connection and saw that this book was an actual prime mover in the history of the 20th century.
Yes, which is why I brought it to everyone's attention, because it is such an obscure work that no one has ever mentioned it to me in any context. And as I mentioned in my talk, I quite literally stumbled on it in my school library. And I think I have to say as well, you mentioned that it was very spicy. There were several reactions. I was talking to Mr. Fahrenheit after the talk was over, and he basically said there was a line that existed that you basically went right up to the edge of, but I was successful in not crossing over that line. And I think Pete said something similar to me as well. So I think it was successful in saying what needed to be said with the discipline that it needed to be said.
Yeah, agree 100%.
Well
and
done.
I'm hoping. I think you guys may. I mean, I saw Pete asking about this, but I'm kind of hoping maybe you two do some podcasts about this, or take this research further, or at least talk about this book more and dig into the connections even more deeply to Mr. Churchill and other figures.
We can
Yes.
talk about that off. We can talk about that while we're not recording.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed. Well, so Mandrill's definitely got quite a bit of praise from everyone at the conference, but it is now time for us to move into our final speech of the whole conference, and conveniently he is here with us on this recording as well. So Mr. Not Me, Not You closed out the conference this year, which with a fantastic vibes speech, as you tend to give. And I thought it was a great way of closing out the Road Ahead conference. So why don't you give the audience your pitch?
Yeah, I am definitely a vibes focused speaker, but the basic gist of the talk was an invective to virtue, specifically the virtue of obedience when it comes to giving your trust to an organization such as the OGC that you have chosen to be a part of, and kind of giving over your ego and putting it aside for the betterment of the organization, as well as trying to remind everybody that by accepting to be a part of the Old Glory Club, that you have taken up a duty to help move history, and which is heavy, but this is a heavy thing that we're doing. So it's I think it's necessary for everybody to understand that.
I mean, at the very first conference we all went to, Paul Fahrenheit, as he was known back then, gave a speech on, I think Yaki and Spangler were the particular topics, and he described us as the culture-bearing strata. And I think at this point, all of us in the organization are demonstrating that we are, in fact, that, which is an immense obligation to take on. But yeah, I thought your speech was very good at driving home the seriousness of our relationship. We're not just business partners or just some social club. We're actually a brotherhood, and we must remember our duties and obligations to all of our brothers in the chapters. And a surprising number of people actually, just because I say surprising, just because it's rare that a single speech gets referenced by so many people. But actually, the first speech you ever gave at that same initial conferences, I find it's referenced quite often by people I talk to as something that really motivated them. So hopefully this one does the same. And yeah, you seem to have a knack for giving this kind of talk.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely hear people reference your first speech from that first conference many years ago, and it's definitely one that sticks out in my mind for sure.
Well, now I feel like I missed something. I sadly was off setting up the after party when Curtis gave his speech.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna get audio of it, so we'll pass it around.
Yep. And with that, we closed out the whole conference. It was fantastic. Definitely the best one we've done so far. It's only going to get better from here. Do we have any other concluding thoughts, gentlemen? Anything you think the audience should know?
Did anyone else speak?
Yeah. No, that
No
was
one
it.
else spoke.
I've been looking at the schedule. We went through everyone.
Okay.
Yeah, I just had a couple of closing thoughts on the event. So there was something that really stood out to me at this event that didn't stand out to me in the events prior, and that is that everybody who attended is kind of on the same spiritual wavelength. It's not that we all use the same language or that we've all read the same authors. It seems to be a sort of resonance where we all understand not only where we are, what time it is, what the endeavor is that we've taken up, but also that we can immediately expect that the person we're talking to is also in the exact same spot. And the themes that came out of each individual talk were all resonant in the same way, beyond just sharing the same theme of the road ahead. So I am more and more convinced that the hand of providence is at our back, and that as long as we keep the faith, this thing that we're putting together is going to be a very serious force to be reckoned with in the future.
100%. Let me just tell everyone that if you want to be at this conference in the future, you need to join an Old Glory Club chapter. So if you weren't in a chapter this year and you want to come back next year, or if you missed this year because our tickets sold so fast, next year it's only going to be chapter members, and there will be other conferences that some of our chapters are doing that you'll be able to attend as part of the general public. But this conference is now this was the last big conference in this exact style that we're going to be doing publicly, and we are, the OGC, all of us in all of the chapters are one of the prime historical forces moving our country forward. And if you want to be a part of that, now is that time. This is something Mr. Fahrenheit, as people will know him by, yet he's trying to kill that name. But, this is one of the points he's made, that now is the time to early adopt. I would say early adoption period is over, but it's still a great time to join. And if you want to be a part of the culture bearing strata, this is it. Get in touch with us from the website, theoldgloryclub.com. You can see the email address there. I foresee incredible things happening, even just in the next 2 years.
100%. Couldn't have said it better myself. And I think that is an excellent thing to end on, gentlemen. So thank you, everyone, for listening to this after action report of the 2025 Road Ahead OGC conference. Check us out on Pony Express Radio on Thursdays. We've got more exciting content planned for you guys in the coming weeks, so be on the watch out for that. And check us out on Twitter. Get yourself your nicotine fix with Alp, your coffee fix with Fox and Sons Coffee, and get shredded for White Boy Summer with Axios Remote Fitness and Coaching. And continue to support us over here on Substack. And we will see you guys very, very soon.